Hello and welcome to This is Politics. This week we're talking about a whole bunch of stuff. I'm with my partner in crime, Mondli Makhanya. It's getting towards the end of the year. What would you like to talk about?
Well, there has been a massive gathering that has just taken place in Boksburg at Birchwood Hotel, the ANC's National General Council, which is something that happens in between the national conferences. So that is a big topic. There were massive things discussed there, but also I think let's talk about kind of like what is its relevance and...
Yes. Yes, I want to talk to you about that, Mondli. Can we talk about Witness D, the murder assassination of a gentleman called Flam van der Merwe, who testified at the Majanga Commission?
Spine-chilling assassination, definitely we must talk about.
Yes. Shamila Batohi, she's leaving right now.
Yes, I mean, like she's on her last legs. She will be leaving in a couple of weeks and the end of her tenure. And she's off into the sunset. So I think let's assess basically kind of like how successful or unsuccessful it was.
Yes, I have thoughts on that. Mondli, I want to stop you. This thing where you say, let's talk about the NGC. Quite frankly, I'm tired of talking about meetings. We talk about meetings all the time in this country. It's like, the ANC has another conference. On January 8th next year, we'll be talking about the ANC statement about the year. And then before you know it, it will be the ANC Cabinet Lekgotla. And then there's Cabinet Lekgotla. When am I going to talk about, jobs are being made, factories are being opened up? Am I being a bit too harsh here?
No, I think you are not being harsh. You are just off beam, I would say.
Okay, tell me more.
No, countries are run by political parties.
Yes.
Governments are made up of political parties.
Yeah.
And we can talk about all those things. We can talk about environmental policy. We can talk about sporting policy. We can talk about educational policy. But those policies, the end of the day, are passed by parliaments. And the people who make up the cabinet are actually politicians who belong to political parties.
Yes.
ANC.
Hold on.
Yeah.
This is the ANC, which said to me, this is my manifesto. This is what we're going to do in 2.5 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, right? So I signed up to that and said, okay, I'll vote for you, Party X or Party B or Party D. Well, why are we always talking about policy and not seeing its implementation? I would like to actually have a meeting where where are we with all the things that we were promised in May 29, 2024?
Let's discuss the nature of the National General Council of the ANC,
Okay.
why they have it in the first place. I mean, like they have their conferences every 5 years.
Yes.
And the purpose of the NGC is to assess how they have done in implementing the resolutions of the last conference. And this is supposed to be a stock-taking exercise. Yeah, and so they will look at, they break into commissions and they look at how they've done in education, how they've done on the economy, how they've done on social transformation, etc., etc. Where I will definitely agree with you is that every time the ANC goes into conferences, they come up with new policies, they come up with resolutions about this and about that. And whereas actually, I mean, like they produce papers about this and about that. Whereas actually, South Africa has no shortage of policies. South Africa has no shortage of plans. We have them, whether it's the National Development Plan, and at some point we had something called a SGISA. And when we were coming out of COVID, there was an economic recovery plan, etc., etc. There are a million plans. So I think a more focused thing that the ANC should be doing in the stock taking that they've been doing in the past week is actually looking at specifically, look at each policy kind of like versus the target for a certain thing, whether it's literacy or whatever. I think that would be a much more useful exercise and the use of their time. People would have taken leave, and also kind of like people would have missed out on Christmas parties at this time of year.
Very important. Very important. Yes.
You feel very strongly that we shouldn't. You feel very, very strongly that these meetings should not be held. That we are discussing what political parties are discussing.
No. I think a good policy. I think a good conference is a good thing. But a conference of a political party does two things for me. It's that it sets them up as a party. It refines their structures, that this is our leadership, this is how we do things, this is who we've got for the next 5 years to lead us into a new era, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then the second thing is to set out your stall. My stall is, I'm going to reduce crime. This is how I'm going to do it. Then your stall is, as you rightly say, on education. This is my stall. This is what I'm going to do. If you keep on putting up the stall, but you never do anything about actually implementing the stall when you are in power, and I need to say the ANC had 60%, more than 60% in 1994, more than nearly 69% in 2004, 62% again 2009, 2014, 57% in 2019. It could have done something. So the stall was put out and they never really implemented much of it. Some of it, yes, here and there, but not much of it. The ANC today meets and meets and meets and meets again. But you don't see the implementation and that's what exercises me. I'm very happy for the ANC to have this. But for me, the key thing that I didn't get from this meeting of the ANC, this NGC, is the examination of, we have our policy as the ANC, and we are now in a coalition government with the DA, and how does that policy translate when we have to deal with a party that comes from a totally different ideological background, whose priorities may be very different to the ANC's. Those are the nuts and bolts that I thought I would be seeing. I'm not saying the ANC should say, oh, we want the national health insurance, but the DA doesn't want it, so we don't want it anymore. I want the ANC to stand its ground and say that's what it stands for. But in the context of this government of national unity, this is what we may be able to deliver, given that we are a 40% party. The ANC didn't do that. That's why we had the debacle of a budget that got kicked out. No?
Yes, what I would want the ANC to do, I think what I find frustrating about the ANC is that they discuss, kind of airy-fairy things, which they think are deep, like the balance of forces. and that is the manner in which the DA discussion would have come up. Is that kind of like, so what are the balance of society? What are the balance of forces in the society? And then they look at like kind of like what the impact of the motive forces. All language that basically belongs in the 1960s or 70s. Yeah. When the ANC was an openly leftist party, and which was at that time heavily influenced by the Communist Party, and which basically it was an ANC that was in exile, and kind of like theory mattered at that time. This is not time for theory. You are in government. And as I said, you have plans, you have policies that have been cooked, and which have been designed with the help of policy institutes, of think tanks and varsities and so on. So what I would really like the ANC to get back to, or even the ANC as a partner in a coalition government which has many parties. And I'm a bit of a stuck record on this one, and that is to get back to the NDP. You know, the NDP was drawn up between 2009 and 2011 with kind of like the people who went out into the countryside, into the cities and so on. And there was a diagnostic report that was drawn up. These are the problems that this country is kind of like faces, and the diagnostic report was then taken, then the National Planning Commission then sat, and they actually kind of like came up with solutions. And like there's a plan, it was adopted in 2012, and everybody adopted it. Parliament adopted it. All the political parties across the spectrum adopted the NDP. And it was supposed to mature in 2030. There were targets that should have matured in 2030. And obviously, kind of like it's been gathering dust. I think if we achieved like 20% of what was in the NDP, I think this country would be very far. So I would like the ANC as a partner in the GNU to take that document, and because it's a document that's owned by South Africa now, it's not a party's document. And that's the document that should be based on, we're now 5 years from 2030, 4 years from 2030 actually. And I think that we should take that and look at the NDP and say, what of this can we then start to achieve by 2035? We've lost time. What can we achieve by 2040 realistically as a society, as the partners in the GNU, and as well as other segment of society?
But remind me, wasn't the president of the ANC today and the president of the country today chair of the National Development Committee at some point, right at the beginning?
Right at the beginning, before he came back into government, he was the deputy chair of the National Planning Commission. And
so it's his plan.
It's his plan, and then when he went into office as in his capacity as deputy president, he then kind of like, it was something that he should have been championing even as deputy president. And I think today, as president, it should be South Africa's lodestar. As I said, you know what?
But we're going to have a national dialogue, and he punted this big time in his speech to the NGC when he was talking about the Freedom Charter, another document from 1955.
Yeah, and basically saying that this national dialogue is basically kind of like, it's Freedom Charter 2.0, the Congress of the People 2.0. And you know what? There is absolutely no need for this. We know what the problems are. We know the institutions in this country are there, whether it's the Chapter 9s, whether it's government, whether it's government departments, etc. We have the institutions to implement the things that we should be implementing. It's political will. But before we move off the NDP, it is again another stuck record of mine, and there's a chapter in the NDP about the capable state. And that chapter talks about building the capable state, a professional state, a professional civil service, etc., a state that works. So I think if you just concentrated on that, building that capable state, so many other pieces would fall into place. But obviously, the ANC has always maintained that, we need cadres in the state, and a state that's based on deploying cadres will not be
I have
capable.
to say, I don't always agree with you, Mondli Makhanya, but on that point, I agree with you, and I agree with another person that I don't always agree with, and that's Thabo Mbeki, who has said, he said he listened at the Zondo Commission when President Ramaphosa presented on the ANC's view of what Cadre deployment was. And he said, when we were doing it, as in his administration back in the early 2000s, and of course in Thabo Mbeki's summation, that was the glory days, everything was done the right way, and so forth. But he made a point that the way they envisaged Cadre deployment was, here's a job in government, and they would say, among our ranks, there are excellent people like Mondli Makhanya, like Justice Malala, like Duncan. Let's get it all together and let's encourage them to apply. And they're up against the field of other people who may not be from the ranks of the ANC. And the best person from that is picked. Not particularly an ANC person. Whereas the way Cadre deployment has worked is that there's a job and it doesn't matter whether our candidate is the best or not. Mondli gets that job because he's one of us, not because he'll be the best person for the job. And I think that's where your capable state fell apart.
No, precisely. And just on that point that you make, that very pertinent point, where the ANC should have learned that lesson was that as they were deploying cadres to SOEs and so on, they intended, there was a miraculous thing that happened. They intended to deploy a cadre to go and run Telkom. And as part of just a pretense, they placed an advert in newspapers for the CEO of Telkom, and a man called Sizwe Ngasana answered the advert. He was in the private sector, basically kind of like he thought, okay, I would actually like this job. And he applied.
He was a CA and incredibly
and a strong leader, and he wowed them and he got the job.
Yes.
And Sizwe Ngasana went on to make Telkom
one of the best telecoms companies in the world.
No, exactly.
I mean, I remember him in New York back in the late 90s listing, I think.
Yes.
Amazing, impressive leader, human being.
And then he went on to become a corporate captain, running banks, etc., etc.
Yes.
And his successor, Sipho Maseko, again somebody from the private sector. So as Telkom is now kind of like it's a shining star, and it competes with the Vodacoms and the MTNs of this world, and competes with like other telcos around the continent and the world. So I mean, like that shows you that kind of that you do not need somebody who necessarily is of this
ANC card. Yes, absolutely. I have to tell you, I agree with you everything you've said about Ngasana and Telkom and how well it's done. But it's also one of the worst companies to deal with as a consumer. I have been trying to get rid of my Telkom account because I don't use Telkom. I have no Telkom in my house, but I have a Telkom account. And you cannot get out. For the past 7 years, Telkom has been taking 1,000 rand from me every month. I've tried everything. And so, maybe it's good. Maybe it's not so good. But let's move on. We're back on the NGC. I could talk all afternoon about Telkom. But Telkom, otherwise, Ngasana, amazing human being, amazing. And you're right, the point you make. But on the NGC, can we talk about going into this conference? There was a lot of talk about Ramaphosa, challenge to Ramaphosa, what's going to happen to him. And so in you talking about, is this, what is the discussion? What is the framing of this conference? There's also, it's not an elective conference. The ANC is not supposed to elect people, but it seems to be front and center, Ramaphosa's future or other people's futures at this conference. The point I'm making is that even though we say this is a mid-term policy review, actually the ANC's leadership contestations is coming to the fore. And well, to make a direct question to you, I would say, how long does Ramaphosa have when the discussion is already so current? And in every analysis piece I've read, it's not just about policy and so forth. It's about, well, what happens with Ramaphosa.
So Cyril Ramaphosa, I think when he went into his second term as ANC president, was already lame duck. People were already starting to discuss what comes after who comes after Cyril Ramaphosa, and people were positioning themselves as his successors. And I mean, like, which is the nature of the ANC. After every conference, kind of like people start plotting for the next conference. The camps, either the camps basically get back into their camps or new camps form. But like that's essentially what happens. So he was already lame duck, and absolutely correct. I'm getting the sense, kind of like in the build up to the NGC, that the conversation was about the succession. A lot of the conversation was about the succession, while the man still has about 2 years to go of his term. And I think now, kind of post NGC, that conversation is going to become even more heated. Yes, he did manage to beat off whatever semi-plot or attempt at a plot to oust him, to use the NGC to oust him. He definitely beat that off. But what he did not manage to kill was the conversation about his succession. So, and that essentially makes him, it's going to put him in it's in a weaker position because people are pivoting away from you. People are no longer going to be as afraid of you as the leader. Not that anybody was ever afraid of him, but like it kind of like it weakens him in that way. But I think what it does is that it keeps him, it at least guarantees him passage to 2027 when the ANC holds its conference. But then the discussion becomes whoever succeeds him, will that person want to take over the republic, the reins of the republic immediately, or will that person allow Cyril Ramaphosa to finish his term in 2029, or will he go the way of Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma and just basically be removed immediately after the conference? But the other big topic also was this really boring, the Groundhog Day of the ANC, of the SACP going its own way. I mean, like every time the ANC goes into its conferences, every time the SACP goes into its conferences, this topic comes up.
This is me when I hear SACP goes away, kind of falling asleep over my mic, just like that. This is amazing for me. You and I, in the 1990s, you'd sit there in ANC discussions and listening to them talking, and the SACP guys were the intellectuals, were as they call them, the vanguard. And they would stand up at ANC conferences and say, this is the line of march, as it were. They were the ideologues, and it was supposed to be, if you were in the ANC and got admitted to the SACP, then you were really schooled.
You were the elite of the elite.
Exactly. But these guys, 1994 comes along, they're riding on the ANC. And the ANC is the party of Nelson Mandela, the party of Oliver Tambo, Sisulu. And, it wins. So the SACP goes along and gets cabinet positions in the ANC cabinet. Same thing, 1999, 2004. With the return of Jacob Zuma, the SACP, which had, elbowed out, helped elbow out Thabo Mbeki, it's still, it's muscular. But we never get to know, like, is justice is Duncan, would they vote for the SACP?
Well, the SACP feels muscular. I'm not sure if it's muscular. They think that they are muscular.
Well, members of the Central Committee are in there. I mean, you think about Tula Sinesi, Gwademantashe, Bladin Zimande is one of the longest serving ministers. So I know it feels muscular.
So if I can just debunk the myth of the muscularity. Now, yes, they were muscular, and I think, and their muscularity, I think, began to be basically dimmed or neutered in a way. In 1998, I think it was the 1998 conference of the SACP. And when the SACP was basically making a lot of noise about the gear policy that the ANC had adopted. And what the SACP was trying to, they were trying to basically tell the ANC that the ANC had sold out the Freedom Charter, had sold out the principles of the ANC, and so on. And at that conference, Thabo Mbeki and Nelson Mandela put them in their place. And I think it was Thabo Mbeki who basically kind of like, not in as many words, but he eventually said, okay, if you don't like it here, you're free to go your own way.
Yes.
He dared them, and they're still inside the tent.
Yeah.
I mean, like the greatest victory that the SACP won was a terrible victory, and that was getting Jacob Zuma into power. And you know what Jacob Zuma did? He turned on them, and he became the greatest slayer of the SACP's power and COSATU's power. And he basically, eventually, he weakened the left. And so the SACP of today finds itself in a very invidious position that like they need the ANC because they are very weak. And now it looks like if the SACP decides to go it alone and contest the local government elections, they are going to be forced their members are going to be forced to make a decision between the SACP and the ANC. The dual membership thing could possibly fall away. We'll know for sure sometime in January. And people like in their senior leadership, the names you have mentioned, Gwademantashe, Tula Sinesi, David Masondo, etc., will have to decide, where do I go? Do I go with this ANC that has 40%?
Don't avoid that. They have to decide, where's my heart? Where's my ideological leaning? Which side is my slice of bread buttered?
Yeah. And
what will win?
These are career politicians.
So which side is my bread butter?
And you know what? The elections were only held in June. This government only came into power in June 2024, and it has a life until 2029.
Yes.
So, guess what considerations they are going to have to make about
which
where
takes
they
me
stand.
to a whole thing. So the SACP is going to be absolutely incinerated in any election, local or national, if it even gets there.
The SACP is taking a very suicidal position at this particular point. It is going, and I think it's Gwademantashe who actually put it that way, that the SACP is committing political suicide by trying to go it alone, because who is going to vote for the SACP? What machinery do they have on the ground? It's actually going to even worse than that. I mean, like COSATU in the past has been useful in campaigning for the ANC on the ground. COSATU is weakened and it's no longer as strong, but it's still a strong thing. It's still a strong force. Not as strong a force, as I say, but I think that the COSATU is also going to have to make a decision. Do they go with the SACP, which regards itself as the vanguard party and the party of the proletariat, or do they go with the ANC, which actually where there is power?
That's so interesting. One gets to read, particularly in the financial press, 30 years ago, it would be how many communists are in the cabinet. Now you don't even have that discussion. But with the departure or the breakaway, it's almost that left influence on the ANC and its nationalist politics will be extra dimmed, as it were. And that, for me, the big question, and we can talk about it next year sometime, is what is the ANC's ideological posture going forward. I think it will continue to be left, but it's interesting that without the SACP, where that would place it.
It calls itself a disciplined force of the left. Exactly. That's the ANC.
Exactly.
Well, look, I mean, like the ANC, if we had to speak in political parlance, it's a centre-left party,
yes,
and that's where it stays, and it'll always be, and it's no different from many parties in Scandinavia, for instance, or kind of like social democratic parties in Europe. That's what the ANC basically is, and that's how it will always go forward. I mean, and it will never move further left. And the SACP thinking that it was ever going to do that was just wishful thinking.
Okay, let's touch on some other issues. A week ago, as we record this, a guy called Marius van der Merwe, who gave explosive testimony of murder and all kinds of corruption in Ekurhuleni, gave evidence to the Majanga Inquiry into corruption in the justice cluster. It was quite something that he was assassinated just 2.5 weeks after his testimony. But I wanted to read you something here. Nearly 2,000 people were killed in recorded hits in South Africa between 2000 and 2021, according to the Global Initiative Against Transnational Crime. 108% increase in assassinations was recorded in SA over the past 10 years. I look at this and I say, we have a problem here. We have a problem when whistleblowers, Babita Deokaran, when whistleblowers like that young fellow in Ekurhuleni again, Mafule, the auditor, is gunned down in broad daylight on the highway, and you say, what is this? And I, we don't know for sure that Marius van der Merwe was killed because of the testimony, but we can see that people who raise their hand, raise their head above the parapet are being taken out. I don't know where to start with this issue, how we begin to deal with what we faced with here. Why did this guy die? Why wasn't he protected? Why have so many people continued to die? And then at the heart of the Majanga Inquiry, it's that the Minister of Police sat for 3 days in his rural home in KwaZulu-Natal, and decided to...
Can't you just say his rural home and leave KwaZulu-Natal out of it? He could have been sitting at his rural home in Limpopo.
Okay, it was in his rural home. It just happened to be in KwaZulu-Natal, and wanted to shut down the unit that deals with exactly this sort of thing, as the murder of Marius van der Merwe. I don't understand why this man, it's still a matter for the commission. Why we are still paying his salary. Remember, he's suspended, not fired. So he's still drawing a salary from us, the taxpayers. I don't even know where to start with this stuff.
You know, one of the things we didn't do as a country is post 1994. You know, you've got there were people who fought on the other side of the divide. There were people in the in the SADF. There were people in the SAP. There were people who were in the hit squads. There were people who were with Inkatha. There were people, obviously, who were from the liberation movement armies. There were people who were part of the self-defense units in the townships. There was all those people steeped in violence. There was so much violence. There were lots of guns flowing in the country, and the forces were demobilized. I think the war ended, and people thought like, oh, okay, people are just gonna go back to coexisting and be normal. The country, I mean, cause there's so much violence. The psychosis of violence ran so deep. And if you can remember, in the late 1990s, there was a huge spike in crime, and there were heists, etc. And lots of those guns from the armies, from various armies, found their way into the criminal gangs and into the taxi industry. And so I think we normalized gun violence. We didn't act fast enough against gun violence. We didn't act fast enough against assassinations that were happening in the taxi industry, for instance, that were happening in the gang world. And those people basically graduated into being professional hitmen that any of us could hire to take out your business partner, to take out your spouse, to take out anyone, and then to partake in political killings. And this is why now it's so easy to go and hire somebody to go and take people out. I mean, and Papita's killers, Senzo Mayua's killers, the killers of the people you mentioned earlier on, the whistleblowers. So I think that, I mean, firstly, proliferation of guns, and then the prospering of the hitman industry is among the things that should be so urgently prioritized in this country.
You know, you and I, in the media world, you know, I don't know him that well, but the leader of Rise Mzansi, Songezo Zibi, a few weeks ago, the committee that he leads in Parliament, the Select Committee on Public Accounts,
SCOPA,
is trying to get to the heart of the massive billions of rands of fraud at the Road Accident Fund. And suddenly he pipes up and says, I'm being followed. I'm scared that I'm a target. I may be a target here. And, you know, nothing seems to happen. It's just, oh, okay, well, an elected member of parliament is trying to do the right thing by us, the taxpayers, and he's in fear of his life. Now, that's one person who's got a bit of a profile. You and I know him, you know. But there are so many people working like Mpoma Folet, Ekuruleni, so many others working as a cop. When I think about that young woman who was stopped and threatened by colleagues, you know, there are so many of them, and the culture that you talk about, it's almost like we allowed the well to be poisoned, and what we're seeing with the murder of this Van der Merwe or others, we're drinking from this poisoned well of ours, and it's a terrible, terrible thing to contemplate, to think that that's where we are.
And a lot of these assassins do not get caught. So the chances of me getting caught for having shot somebody, I mean, like, there's no, what's the word?
Accountability?
No, the word that you use for preventative thing, basically. There's nothing to scare me off from actually committing yet another assassination.
Yeah. Because it's fine.
The likelihood of me getting away with it is very high.
Yes.
So I will continue to assassinate. And when, if in the Majanga Commission, it turned out, remember, that some of the guns that had been used to shoot, to kill DJ somebody, and the person I forget the name now, the person who was mistakenly shot over the Transnet contract.
Yes. Marius, the engineer.
The engineer.
Yes.
I mean, like, that those guns had been used in other murders.
Yes, exactly.
And so we're just not on top of
this
it.
This is what, when we think about, and I think our people at home listening to this, watching this, when you think about these assassinations, you also have to think about what we have become, because the people who are supposed, and you make this excellent connection about how the police said these guns were used to kill so-and-so in KwaZulu-Natal. They were used in the attempted murder of this celebrity in Johannesburg, and they were used in the killing of DJ somebody, and used in the killing of this engineer linked to the Transnet investigation and so forth. Now, how we got to have a team that could make those connections was because back in 2016, Willis Mkhunu back in KwaZulu-Natal says we've got to do something about political killings, establishes a team, and that team is the PKTT, Political Killings Trust Team. That is the team that made these connections. And then the minister goes and says, I'm shutting down this Political Killings Trust Team on his own.
After sitting for 3 days in his rural home.
And so, we are saying it's fine. He didn't speak to anyone. Well, who did he speak to?
That is most incredible. As per his own admission, he said it was after a lot of reflection by myself. Even the commissioners were perplexed. It's like they asked him, like, how could you possibly reach this on your own just a day after you were at a funeral with the National Police Commissioner, and you did not mention this to him, and you go and make this huge decision? That thing is extremely suspicious, and one cannot obviously preempt the commission, but the commission's findings. But I think that there was definitely an ulterior motive there.
You're such a diplomat. You want to say this man should be fired, and there should be an investigation into how he could make such a momentous decision. Because that decision speaks directly to the matter of Babita Diokera and Pomafole, the gentleman you mentioned, this Vander Merwe, and so many others who are being killed every day, and many, many thousands of others living in fear because there's so corruption and it's not being done anything with.
To say it was dereliction of duty, it would be wrong. It was actually sabotaging his own police force.
Absolutely. And then you made another point, which I think is fantastic. It's that if I want to take you out, then there is nothing to deter me, because
deterrence.
There's nothing to deter me, because I know that the chances of being arrested and the chances of being prosecuted successfully are so slim that I can get away with it. So I want you to talk to me a bit. Shamila Batohi, the National Director of Public Prosecutions in South Africa, has reached the end of her 6-year term. There are now, there's a short list. There are 5 candidates being interviewed. how should I look at Shamila Batohi's term?
You know, when Shamila Batohi came in, there was so much high hope. She had a stellar record before, both here in South Africa and internationally, because she had been working at The Hague, and she was one of the top prosecutors there. And then so she comes in, and in the interview, she aces it. She was so brilliant, and there was no question about that. She was the person for the job.
Can I stop you there? One of the things for me was not just the person of Shamila Batohi. It was that we had gone through the Jacob Zuma era, where in that time, the NP, the National Prosecuting Authority, had been packed with political appointments. And by that, I mean people who were there to make sure that cases that implicated Jacob Zuma and others in his political world were not taken anywhere forward, and cases against people who may have been seen as being in opposition to him were prioritized. And so it was, for me, philosophically, it was the end of an independent prosecutorial service that said, Justice and Duncan are thieves. We're going to go after them. We're going to prosecute. We're going to convict, and we're going to make sure they get tough sentences. And so it wasn't just that Shamila Batohi, it was the transformation or restoration of our prosecution services to what they should be.
And that is the backdrop against which she should be judged. When she took over, the thing was broken. I mean, the thing was broken, and she was coming in to fix that machine. And I think in judging her, there have been a lot of harsh words being said about basically kind of like about her tenure, that she failed to turn the NPA around, and that we have not had prosecutions from the Zondo Commission, where basically there's so much stuff there. She has made the point that it's not, like the cases have to be investigated before they go before a court, but she now has an investigative capacity. So I think her tenure has been a disappointment, but I think let us not be unfair and think that she was just coming in to merely take over a job that was, we must not think that she was coming over to take an institution that was just needed a bit of tinkering here and there to make it a success. That job is going to be breaking down the NPA was easy. As with anything, bulldozing something is easy, rebuilding something is extremely difficult. And that, I think, is the challenge that Shamila Batohi faced.
Mondli Makhanya, it's our last show for the year. It's our first official show, but it's also our last one for the year. And we start the year next year with vim, vigor, and vitality. So I'm going to say goodbye, but I don't know if you have any words. How are you feeling about the political year ahead?
I think that 2026. I think going into 2026, my thoughts are this: that most important thing is that there's going to be an election at the end of the year. It is the local government elections will be taking place across the country, and what makes me feel very positive as a citizen of the Republic of South Africa is that this country, every 5 years, our people can go and either vote for a national government, a provincial government, or vote for their local government under the purview of an electoral commission that is highly credible. And so I think that exercise in democracy that we do every 5 years is something that we should treasure amidst all the millions of problems that we have in our good republic.
Okay, good. That sounds fantastic. I just want to point out that we did have an election May 29, 2024, and people didn't turn up. I think it's the worst turnout we've had since 1994. So, don't you feel, I feel that the shine of democracy is dimming. People, it's people like us who talk about politics, do all these things, and the politicians themselves, that we haven't maybe said excited people the way you are excited about this thing.
Well, I think that is the downside of what our politicians have done by failing to deliver to the people, particularly at the local government level, that it has actually taken people's belief and faith in the democracy, many people's faith in the democracy away. And that is something that we definitely need to arrest as those who are vested in this constitutional order.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Politics. My name is Justice Malala. I'm with Mondli Makhanya. It's been lovely having you with us. We're back in 2026. Have a good festive season and look after yourself. And we'll be talking and talking and talking in the new year. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Thank you.